The Thorne family believed in statements. Their house on the crest of the hill was a statement, a sprawling limestone monument to new money that lorded over the valley below. Their cars, a matched set of silver German sedans, were statements. Even their parties were statements, and tonight's was the most audacious of all. It was a divorce party, a public execution of a marriage, and Liam was the guest of honor. He stood near the grand French doors that opened onto the terrace, a simple glass of water in his hand, feeling the weight of 200 pairs of eyes. They were the friends, associates, and sycophants of his soon-to-be ex-father-in-law, the real estate magnate Marcus Thorne. Every glance was a mixture of pity and contempt, a silent judgment on the man who had failed to keep up. Clara, his wife, was the radiant center of it all. She moved through the crowd and addressed the color of blood rubies, her laughter sharp and bright. She thought this party was her ultimate victory, the final, definitive humiliation of the quiet, unassuming architect she had married. She thought she was shedding the dead weight of his failed ambitions, his small-town origins, his refusal to play the games her father valued. What Clara didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man they were pitying was one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in their city. They saw a struggling artist. They had no idea they were looking at the anonymous, almost mythical founder of Aethelred Designs, the most innovative and successful architectural firm in the country. Within the hour, their carefully constructed world of arrogance and assumption was going to be demolished, and Liam was holding the detonator in his pocket. The air, thick with expensive perfume and the low thrum of polite conversation, felt charged with a suffocating static. Liam could feel the vibrations of their thoughts, their whispered conclusions. Poor Liam. She was always too good for him. What will he do now? He let the words wash over him, each one a small, sharp stone. For 5 years he had endured this. He had worn their condescension like a scratchy wool coat, a constant, irritating presence. He had done it because he loved Clara, or at least the woman he believed she could be, the woman he saw in rare, unguarded moments. He had hoped his love and patience could build a foundation strong enough to withstand the corrosive influence of her father's world. But some structures are built on sand, and the tide had finally come in. Have you ever felt completely underestimated, as if people were looking right through you, seeing only what they wanted to see? It's a strange, isolating feeling. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. What happened next at that party was a lesson in perception they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The foundations of their reality were about to crack, and the architect they had so casually dismissed was about to show them what a real master builder could do. The demolition was about to begin. Clara tapped a silver spoon against a crystal champagne flute, the delicate chime cutting through the murmur of the crowd. A hush fell. All eyes turned to her. She stood on the low dais where the string quartet had been playing, her smile a perfect predatory curve. Marcus Thorne stood beside her, his arm protectively around her waist, his expression one of paternal pride mixed with smug satisfaction. "I want to thank you all for coming," Clara began, her voice smooth and practiced. "To celebrate a new beginning, a fresh start." She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room before it landed, with surgical precision, on Liam. Some chapters in life are wonderful, and some are necessary learning experiences. A ripple of knowing laughter went through the room. We learn what we want, and more importantly, what we don't want. We learn the difference between ambition and, well, just dreaming. The insult was as clear as the diamond necklace at her throat. Liam's jaw remained relaxed, his expression placid. He took a slow sip of water, his eyes meeting hers across the crowded room. He remembered a night 2 years ago, a dinner much like this one, though smaller, more intimate. He had just won a prestigious but not particularly lucrative award for a community library he had designed for a low-income neighborhood. He had been so proud. He'd brought the blueprints, unrolling them on the polished mahogany table of Marcus Thorne's study to show them his vision. "It's quaint, Liam," Marcus had said, peering at the drawings through his half-moon glasses, as if examining a child's crayon drawing. He'd tapped a thick finger on the detailed rendering of the children's reading nook. "But where's the money in it? Libraries, community centers, these are hobbies, not a career. A man builds skyscrapers, monuments to his own success. He doesn't build little book boxes for the poor." Clara had sided with her father, of course. She always did. "Daddy's right, darling," she'd said, her tone gentle, but laced with the familiar disappointment he had come to know so well. "It's sweet, but it's not going to get us the life we want, the life I deserve." He had tried to explain that architecture for him was about more than just profit. It was about creating spaces that served people, that elevated the human experience. It was about legacy, not just luxury. They had looked at him with a kind of baffled pity. It was the moment he knew, deep down, that the gulf between them was not a crack to be repaired, but a canyon that could never be bridged. It was the moment he decided to keep Ethelred Designs a secret. He had founded it under a pseudonym, managed by his trusted friend and partner, David Chen, precisely to shield it from this world. He wanted to build his empire on his own terms, on his own merits, untainted by the Thorne family's corrosive definition of success. And he wanted to see if his wife could ever love him, Liam the man, without the gilded trappings of Liam the magnate. He had his answer now. Back in the present, Marcus took the microphone from Clara. "My daughter is a thoroughbred," he boomed, his voice resonating with the arrogance of a man who had never been told no. "And you can't hitch a thoroughbred to a plow horse. It's a matter of breeding, of spirit." He clapped a hand on Liam's shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look friendly but felt like a branding iron. "No hard feelings, son. You're a decent fellow. Just not in our league. But we'll make sure you're taken care of. A little severance package, you might say, to get you back on your feet." The crowd roared with laughter. Liam gave a small, tight smile. He felt the familiar weight in his jacket pocket. It wasn't a wallet. It was a simple, well-worn leather portfolio, no larger than a paperback book. Inside were not architectural drawings, but a set of keys in a single, encrypted flash drive. One key was to the penthouse apartment of the newly completed Celestial Tower, the very skyscraper Marcus Thorne had lost the bidding war for last year. The other was to a hangar at the private airfield just outside the city. The flash drive contained the entire financial architecture of his life, the labyrinthine and brilliant structure of holding companies and trusts that made Ethelred Designs both an anonymous entity and a financial juggernaut. He subtly touched the worn leather through the fabric of his suit, the contact a small, grounding comfort. It was his symbolic object, a tangible reminder of the reality that existed just beneath the surface of this charade. This party, this humiliation, was just the facade. He was about to reveal the true structure underneath. A procession began, led by Clara's sneering cousin, a man named Julian. They carried gifts, gag gifts. One person handed him a hard hat from a toy store. Another gave him a book titled Networking for Dummies. Julian himself presented the final gift, a small, shabby-looking piggy bank. "To help you save up for your next big idea, Liam," Julian said, his voice dripping with condescension. Liam accepted each item with a quiet, "Thank you," his dignity an invisible shield that their petty insults could not penetrate. He wasn't angry. He was simply observing, cataloging. Each sneer, each laugh, was another brick in the wall that was rising between his past and his future. And tonight, he would finally walk through the door in that wall and lock it forever behind him. From across the room, Clara watched Liam, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. It might have been a sliver of guilt, quickly extinguished by the fire of her own self-justification. She turned to her father, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Do you think the settlement is enough? Maybe we should have offered a little more. It feels cruel. Marcus scoffed, waving a dismissive hand as he signaled a waiter for another glass of scotch. Don't be sentimental, darling. It's more than generous. $50,000 is more money than he's probably seen in one place in his entire life. It's enough for him to get a small apartment, find some low-level drafting job. He'll be fine. We're cutting him loose, not destroying him. He took a sip of his drink, the amber liquid glowing in the soft light. This is a business transaction. You're divesting from a failing asset, that's all. Clara nodded, her resolve hardening. Her father was right. This was business. Her marriage had been an investment, and it had yielded no returns. She had believed in Liam, in his quiet intensity, mistaking his methodical patience for a lack of drive. She thought her father's connections and her social influence could mold him, shape him into the kind of power player she desired. But he had resisted. He'd insisted on his artistic integrity, working on small, insignificant projects, while her friends married bankers and tech moguls who bought them summer homes in the Hamptons. Her frustration had curdled into resentment, and the resentment into contempt. Tonight was the final, satisfying act of that emotional divestment. Liam, meanwhile, found a moment of quiet near a large potted fig tree. A young woman, Isabel, one of Clara's junior associates from the art gallery she ran as a hobby, approached him hesitantly. She was one of the few people in this room who had ever shown him genuine kindness. "Liam, I'm so sorry," she murmured, her eyes full of sincere sympathy. "This is awful. You don't deserve this." Liam offered her a genuine, gentle smile. It felt like the first real expression he'd made all evening. "It's all right, Isabel. Don't worry about me. Sometimes a controlled demolition is the only way to make room for a new structure, a better one." Isabel looked confused by his architectural metaphor, but she nodded anyway. "Are you going to be okay?" "I have a feeling," Liam said, his gaze drifting over the heads of the crowd to where Clara and Marcus stood, basking in their perceived triumph, "that I'm going to be more than okay." His mind flashed back to a phone call from earlier that week. He'd been in his real office, a minimalist space of steel and glass overlooking the city from the 81st floor of a building no one associated with him. David Chen, his partner and the public face of Ethelred Designs, had been on the speakerphone. "The final acquisition papers for the Sterling Conrad Group are ready for your signature," David had said, his voice crisp and efficient. "Once you sign, we'll own the controlling interest. That makes us the largest developer in the state, bigger than Thorne Development by a factor of 3. "And the announcement?" Liam had asked, staring out at the city lights. "Scheduled for 9 p.m. tonight. It will hit every major financial newswire simultaneously. By 9:05, Marcus Thorne will know his empire is no longer the biggest on the board. By morning, he'll know we're coming for him next." "Good," Liam had said, a single word that carried the weight of years of planning and patience. "Is the transport ready?" "The Augusta is fueled and waiting at the airfield. The pilot is on standby. I'll be there to meet you." "Are you sure about this, Liam? Theatrics aren't usually your style." "This isn't for them, David," Liam had replied softly. "It's for me. It's the closing of a chapter, a foundation stone for the next one." Now, back at the party, he saw the theatricality of it all with perfect clarity. This entire event was a stage play, and he had been cast as the fool. But the script he was following was one he had written himself. He checked the time on his simple, elegant watch. 8:45 p.m. The final act was about to begin. The quiet overture was ending, and the crescendo was coming. The climax of the evening arrived, as Liam knew it would, with a flourish of performative paperwork. Marcus Thorne tapped his glass again, calling for silence. Two waiters, looking deeply uncomfortable, walked forward carrying a large silver tray. On it, nestled amongst rose petals, were a sheaf of documents and an ornate fountain pen, the divorce papers. "And now," Clara announced, her voice ringing with false solemnity. For the final formality, the amicable end to an era. She picked up the pen and signed her name with a dramatic swirl. Then she held the pen out to Liam. Liam, your turn. The crowd parted, forming a clear path between him and the dais. It felt like a gauntlet. Every eye was on him, expectant, waiting for his final act of capitulation. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the visible, legal confirmation of his defeat. He could feel the pressure, the collective will of the room pushing him to sign, to accept his fate, to disappear quietly into the failure they had assigned to him. He walked forward slowly, his footsteps echoing in the sudden, profound silence. The string quartet had stopped playing. The clinking of glasses had ceased. The only sound was the faint, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall, counting down the seconds to the explosion. He reached the dais and looked down at the papers. He saw the clause about the $50,000 settlement. He saw the non-disclosure agreement designed to prevent him from ever speaking about the Thorne family. It was all there, a neat and tidy package meant to erase him. He looked up, not at the papers, but at Clara. He looked into her eyes, searching for any last glimmer of the woman he had once loved. He found nothing, only a cold, hard certainty. Her victory was complete. "Go on, Liam," Marcus urged, his voice a low growl of impatience. "Sign it. Let's not drag this out." Liam didn't reach for the pen. Instead, he reached into his own jacket pocket, not for the leather portfolio, but for his phone. The action was so mundane, so out of place in the high drama of the moment, that it caused a ripple of confusion through the crowd. He unlocked the screen, his thumb hovering over a single contact simply labeled, "Execute." He looked at Clara one last time. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked, his voice quiet but carrying in the stillness. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she said, her voice dripping with finality. "All right then," he said softly. He pressed the screen. A single text message, the word "now," was sent. He put the phone back in his pocket. He had held on to a sliver of hope, a microscopic chance that she would see the cruelty of this moment and pull back. But she hadn't. The door was now closed. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched, becoming awkward. Marcus opened his mouth to say something scathing, but he was cut off. It started as a feeling more than a sound, a deep, resonant vibration in the soles of his feet, in the crystal glasses on the tables. Then came the sound, a low, rhythmic thumping from far away. Whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. It was a sound utterly alien to the manicured serenity of the Thorne estate. Heads began to turn. Guests murmured, looking around in confusion. What was that noise? It grew steadily, rapidly, louder and more insistent. Whoomp, 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 whoomp. The vibration intensified, rattling the massive windows in their frames. The water in Liam's glass developed tiny concentric ripples. The sound was no longer distant. It was close. It was overhead. A collective gasp went through the room as people rushed to the windows in the terrace doors. Their faces, lit by the party lights, turned upward, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Hovering above the estate, then beginning a slow, controlled descent toward the impossibly green, football field-sized lawn, was a helicopter. It was not a news chopper or a medical transport. It was a sleek, black Augusta AW-109, a machine that screamed of power, wealth, and importance. Its landing lights cut through the twilight, sweeping across the stunned faces of the guests. Marcus Thorne's face went from smug to purple with rage. "What in God's name is this?" he bellowed, storming toward the terrace. "Security! Get that thing off my property! I'll have them arrested for trespassing." Clara stared, her mouth agape, her perfectly orchestrated party literally being blown apart by the powerful downdraft from the rotor blades. Napkins flew from tables, Gossamer scarves were whipped from women's shoulders, and the carefully arranged rose petals on the silver tray scattered across the floor like bloody confetti. The helicopter touched down on the lawn with a gentle finality, its engines whining down but not shutting off completely. The side door slid open with a smooth, hydraulic hiss. A man in a sharply tailored suit stepped out. He was calm, poised, and carried an expensive leather briefcase. It was David Chen. He scanned the chaos on the terrace, his eyes finding Liam. He gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. That was Liam's cue. He turned his back on the divorce papers, leaving them unsigned on the tray. He began to walk, not with the defeated shuffle of the man who had entered the party, but with the confident, purposeful stride of a man in complete control. The crowd, which had moments before been a wall of contempt, parted for him like the Red Sea, their faces a gallery of slack-jawed astonishment. "Liam!" Clara's voice was a shrill cry of confusion and outrage. "Liam, where do you think you're going? You get back here. You are not leaving until you sign these papers." He reached the French doors leading to the terrace and paused, turning to face her one last time. The wind from the helicopter whipped his hair and tugged at his suit. He looked, in that moment, like a figure from a different world. He was no longer the plow horse. He was the storm. "Those aren't the correct papers, Clara," he said, his voice calm and clear, easily carrying over the sound of the idling rotors. The quiet bomb had been delivered. "My lawyers sent the real documents to your father's office this afternoon. They're a bit more comprehensive." He saw the confusion on her face, the dawning horror in Marcus's eyes. He didn't wait for it to register fully. He turned and walked across the stone terrace, his shoes making a steady, resolute sound. David met him at the steps leading down to the lawn. "Everything is in motion," David said quietly, falling into step beside him. "I know," Liam replied. He reached the open door of the helicopter. Before stepping inside, he looked back at the house, at the party that had become a tableau of frozen disbelief. Clara was standing there, a silhouette against the bright lights of her own failed triumph, the useless pen still clutched in her hand. "And Clara," Liam called out, his voice imbued with a final, devastating clarity, "the man you think you're divorcing, he never actually existed." With that, he stepped into the aircraft. David followed, sliding the door shut. The whine of the turbines deepened. The rotor blades spun into a blur, and with a powerful surge, the black helicopter lifted off the ground. It ascended gracefully, tilted its nose, and soared away into the dark, star-dusted sky, leaving behind a whirlwind of scattered debris and shattered illusions. For a full minute, no one moved. The only sound was the fading whump, whump, whump of the helicopter, the wind sighing through the trees, and the frantic, panicked beating of Marcus Thorne's heart. The party was over. The real accounting had just begun. Marcus was the first to break the spell. He fumbled for his phone, his thick fingers shaking as he speed-dialed his head of legal counsel, a man named Henderson. "Henderson!" He barked into the phone, his voice hoarse with fury and a rising tide of fear. "What the hell is going on? Liam just mentioned some papers from his lawyers. What papers?" He listened, his face, already ruddy from scotch and anger, draining of all color. The hand holding the phone began to tremble. "What do you mean, a hostile takeover bid?" he whispered, the sound barely audible. "From who? Athelred Designs? I've never heard of them." He listened again, his eyes wide with dawning comprehension and terror. He stumbled back, bumping into a table and sending a bottle of champagne crashing to the floor. He looked at Clara, his expression one of utter devastation. "Athelred Designs," he croaked, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "The anonymous firm that outbid us for the Celestial Tower project. The one that just bought out Sterling Conrad this afternoon." He took a ragged breath. "Their sole proprietor, the man who has been running it from behind a wall of shell corporations for the last 5 years, is Liam." The words dropped into the stunned silence of the room like a series of anvils. If the helicopter had been a shock, this was an earthquake. The ground beneath their feet had just given way. Clara simply stared at her father, her mind refusing to process the information. It was impossible. It was a joke. Liam? Her Liam? The quiet, unambitious man who wore off-the-rack suits and drove a sensible sedan? The man who got excited about designing public libraries? No, she said, shaking her head, a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat. No, that's not possible. You're wrong. Henderson has the documents, Clara, Marcus roared, his fear transmuting back into rage, this time directed at his own monumental stupidity. The incorporation papers, the financial statements, the proof of funds, it's all verified. He's worth, God, he's worth more than all of us combined, 10 times over. The implications began to crash down on Clara like a tidal wave. The Celestial Tower, the most prestigious architectural project in the city's history, the one her father had obsessed over losing, belonged to Liam. The buyout of Sterling Conrad, a move that had sent shockwaves through the financial world that afternoon, was Liam's doing. His quietness wasn't failure, it was focus. His humility wasn't weakness, it was camouflage. He hadn't been building small projects, he had been building an empire, right under their noses, and they had been too blind, too arrogant to see it. She thought of all the times she had belittled him, the condescending remarks about his little hobbies, the sighs of disappointment, the open mockery. She saw the party, this grand monument to her arrogance, for what it was, a public declaration of her own blindness. She had thrown a party to celebrate divorcing a plow horse, only to discover she'd been married to a king who had hidden his crown to see if she would love the man beneath it. She had failed the test in the most spectacular way imaginable. Her phone buzzed in her purse. It was an email notification. With trembling hands, she opened it. The sender was from a top-tier law firm she'd never heard of. The subject line was, Divorce Settlement Proposal, Aethelred versus Thorne. She opened the attached document. It was not the simple 2-page document she had signed. It was a 150-page behemoth of legal and financial clauses. It detailed in excruciating clarity the complete separation of their assets. And under the section detailing Liam's declared wealth was a number with so many zeros she couldn't immediately comprehend it. Her world tilted on its axis. The ruby-red dress suddenly felt like a costume for a fool. The days that followed were a blur of chaos and consequence. The news broke, first on the financial wires, then in the mainstream press. Mysterious architect revealed. Ethelred Designs founder Liam Connor announces hostile takeover of Thorne Development. The story was sensational. A hidden billionaire, an underdog story, a corporate titan hiding in plain sight. Liam became an overnight legend. The Thorne family became a cautionary tale, a public laughingstock. Their divorce party was reported on with savage glee, a perfect symbol of their hubris. Marcus Thorne's empire, which had seemed so unassailable, began to crumble. His investors grew nervous. His board of directors, smelling blood in the water and seeing a new, more powerful shark circling, began to question his leadership. The takeover bid from Aethelred was aggressive and brilliantly executed. Marcus found himself outmaneuvered at every turn, his old-world bluster and boardroom bullying useless against Liam's cold, surgical precision. The architect he had dismissed as a dreamer was dismantling his life's work with the same methodical care he applied to his blueprints. Clara locked herself in the house, the grand limestone statement that now felt like a prison. She replayed every moment of her marriage, every conversation, every dismissive glance, but now viewed through the terrifying new lens of the truth. She remembered Liam trying to talk to her about structural integrity, about foundations, about how the most important parts of a building are the ones you can't see. He hadn't just been talking about architecture, He had been talking about them. She finally worked up the courage to call him. The number she had for him was, of course, disconnected. She sent a desperate email to the law firm. To her surprise, she received a reply a day later. Not from a lawyer, but from Liam himself. The message was simple. I will meet you. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the Corner Bean Cafe on Elm Street. The Corner Bean. It was a small, unassuming coffee shop they had gone to on their second date. She hadn't been back since, dismissing it as beneath her. The choice of venue was a message in itself. He was taking her back to the beginning, forcing her to confront the person she had been before her father's world had fully consumed her. She arrived the next day, dressed down in expensive jeans and a cashmere sweater, an attempt to appear humble. Liam was already there, sitting at a small table by the window, nursing a simple black coffee. He looked exactly the same, yet entirely different. The quietness she had once mistaken for weakness now radiated an undeniable strength. The calm in his eyes was not passivity, it was power held in reserve. Liam, she began, her voice unsteady as she sat down. I don't know what to say. Then perhaps you should listen, he said, his tone not unkind but devoid of the warmth it once held for her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This was his verbal chess match, and he had already seen the board, 12 moves ahead. For 5 years, Clara, I gave you the truest version of myself I could. I gave you my time, my love, my loyalty. I wanted to build a life with you, a real life, based on something more than the size of our house or the make of our car. He leaned forward slightly. I kept Ethelred a secret for one reason. I needed to know if you, if anyone, could value me for who I was, not for what I had. I created a test, and I prayed you would pass. I hoped the woman I fell in love with was still in there, buried under all the thorn. The way he said her family name made it sound like a disease. I'm so sorry, Liam, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I was a fool. I was blind. My father, he twisted my values. Your father provided the materials, Clara, but you built the prison yourself, he countered, his voice still level. This was his moral mirror, forcing her to see her own reflection, unvarnished. I remember every single time. The time you called my library design charity work in front of your friends. The time you threw away the first draft of my plans for the children's hospital because they were cluttering up the study. The time you laughed with your father when he called me a plow horse. I remember it all. He wasn't listing grievances to wound her. He was stating facts, laying the foundation for his final conclusion. You didn't just fail the test, Clara. You set it on fire and danced on the ashes. The tears now streamed down her face. Every word was true. She had done all those things. What do you want, Liam? To destroy us? To take everything from my father? Your father is a builder who used shoddy materials, Liam said, his gaze unwavering. His company is over-leveraged and poorly managed. It was going to collapse eventually. I'm just making sure that when it does, the talented people who work there have somewhere to land. I'm not destroying Thorn Development. I'm renovating it. I'm giving it a foundation it never had. Integrity. He pushed a single envelope across the table. It was thick and heavy. That is my final settlement offer. It's generous. It's more than enough for you to live a very comfortable life, to start over, to build something of your own, something real. But it is not a golden parachute into the life you thought you were entitled to. The money is conditional on you signing a permanent NDA and agreeing to never contact me or my company again. She looked at the envelope, then back at him, a desperate hope in her eyes. Is there no chance for us? Can we start over? For the first time, a flicker of something like sadness crossed Liam's face. The architect is gone, Clara. All that's left is the demolition expert. The foundation of what we had is poisoned, and I will not build on a toxic site. He stood up, placing a $10 bill on the table for their coffees. Goodbye, Clara. I truly hope you find what you're looking for." He walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her alone with the envelope and the wreckage of her life. She finally understood. His revenge wasn't loud or fiery. It was quiet, structural, and absolute. He hadn't just divorced her. He had deconstructed her entire reality. The takeover was completed within a month. As Liam had predicted, Thorn Development was acquired and immediately began a massive restructuring. Marcus Thorn was forced into a quiet retirement, his name and portrait removed from the lobby of the building he had built. The company, under the new public leadership of David Chen, but guided by Liam's vision, was rebranded. Its new mission statement focused on sustainable design, urban renewal projects, and community-focused architecture. It began work on a state-of-the-art children's hospital, using the preliminary designs Liam had drafted years ago, the very ones Clara had once dismissed as clutter. The poetic justice was so precise, so elegant, it was almost cruel. Eleanor Thorne, the silent enabler, finally found her voice. In a devastating confrontation, she told her husband that his pride and arrogance had not just cost them their company, but their daughter's happiness and their family's dignity. The rift between them was profound, a structural failure in the foundation of their own marriage. Clara, stripped of her social standing and the power that came with her family name, signed the papers. The settlement was, as Liam had promised, generous enough. She bought a modest but tasteful apartment in a less fashionable part of the city. She sold her ruby red dress and her diamond necklace. The money went into a trust. For the first time in her life, she was truly on her own. A blank blueprint with no architect to guide her. The process was agonizing. She was forced to confront the person she had become. She had to get a real job, working at a small, independent art gallery where her name meant nothing. She had to learn to budget, to live without the constant validation of her social circle, most of whom had abandoned her the moment the Thorne family fortune became questionable. Some days the bitterness was a physical ache. She resented Liam for his deception, for his perfectly executed retribution. But on other, clearer days, she knew he had only held up a mirror. The reflection was hers alone. She began to find a strange, fragile peace in her new, smaller life. She discovered a genuine passion for art, not as a status symbol, but as a form of human expression. She made new friends, people who liked her for her conversation and her sense of humor, not her connections. She was slowly, painstakingly building a new structure, a new self, on the rubble of the old one. It wasn't a palace, but for the first time, it felt like home. A year passed. The city skyline was changing. The Celestial Tower was nearing completion, a breathtaking spiral of glass and steel that seemed to scrape the heavens. It was universally hailed as a masterpiece, a new icon for the city. Liam, now publicly known as the visionary behind Aethelred Designs, had shed his anonymity, but not his nature. He remained intensely private, eschewing the media spotlight and pouring his energy and a significant portion of his fortune into his philanthropic foundation. The grand opening of the Westside Community Center was a major event. It was the library project Marcus Thorne had once mocked as a little book box. Now it was a sprawling, beautiful complex with a library, a theater, and a public garden. It was a testament to Liam's original vision, a space built for people, not for profit. Liam stood in the sunlit atrium, watching children run laughing into the new reading nook, the very feature his ex-father-in-law had sneered at. David Chen was at his side, a glass of sparkling cider in his hand. "You did it, my friend," David said, clapping him on the back. "You actually did it." "We did it," Liam corrected him with a smile. He felt a profound sense of peace. The anger, the hurt, the years of quiet endurance, it had all been transmuted into this, into creating something positive, something that would last. He hadn't just won, he had built something better in the space where the old thing had been. He was no longer defined by his past, by his marriage, or by the humiliation he had endured. He was defined by the structures he created, both of steel and of spirit. That same evening, miles away, Clara was closing up the small art gallery where she worked. A television in the corner was playing the local news, and a story about the community center's opening came on. She saw Liam on the screen, surrounded by smiling children, looking happier and more at ease than she had ever seen him. He was explaining some architectural feature to a reporter, his passion for his work evident in his every gesture. A pang of regret, sharp and familiar, went through her. She saw the man she had lost, the life she had thrown away. But then something else surfaced. A quiet sense of acknowledgement. He was a good man. He was doing good things. The world was better for his work in it. She had been a storm he had to weather, an obstacle he had to overcome to become the person he was meant to be. She turned off the television, a small, sad smile on her lips. She had a long way to go. The foundation of her new life was still setting, but it was hers. She picked up her bag, locked the gallery door, and walked out into the cool evening air, not a fallen queen, but simply a woman, walking toward an unknown future of her own design. Liam's story is a powerful reminder that true worth is not measured by applause or bank statements, but by character and integrity. It teaches us that the most formidable strength is often quiet, patient, and underestimated. The arrogant often build their houses on foundations of sand, and a single tide of truth can wash it all away. He didn't seek to become cruel like them. He simply sought to build a better world, and in the end, that was the most profound victory of all. Do you believe Clara and her family got the justice they deserved? Or was Liam's response too calculated? I'm always fascinated to hear your perspectives, so please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story of vindication and integrity as compelling as I did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the quiet battles and triumphant victories of the human heart. Thank you for watching.